Good afternoon. On behalf of the King County Bar Association, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Luncheon Committee, welcome to our Feeding Your Soul by Feeding and Helping Another, part one of a three-part luncheon series. My name is Richard Jones. I am a United States District Judge, and I'm also the chair of our committee. Now, we began this program many years ago under the sage guidance and leadership of King County Superior Court retired Judge Charles V. Johnson and Phil Ginsburg. Each year, our committee has hosted an annual luncheon to celebrate Dr. King's legacy, and we plan to do the same exact thing for 2021 under a slightly different format and a few months in advance of our normally scheduled Friday before Dr. King's birthday. All of this is due to COVID-19 in our interest in keeping everyone safe. Hopefully we can return to our large format in 2022. So you're probably asking, so why exactly are we celebrating Dr. King's birthday this far in advance and this early? Our committee met and we discussed and we deliberated and we came up with an idea that was abundantly clear to all of us. We needed to act now and we needed to act in the midst of a crisis. You don't have to go far to see, to hear, or read about an issue affecting members of our community, including children who face the stark, harsh realities of food insecurity. And these are challenges that they face every single day. With soaring unemployment and devastation from the virus, the need of our food banks is soaring. There's no need for members of our community to have to go to bed at night and fill their stomachs with water so they feel full and minimize the hunger as they go to sleep. But that's a stark reality for many people in our community. Today, you can help change that, or at least ease the pain for some, by helping feed our community. I want to talk to you about one other issue that's a matter of deep passion from the King County Bar Association, and that's to continue to help provide scholarship assistance to minority law students who are in great need of financial assistance to complete their law school educations. Now, in a few minutes, you will hear from Gloria Hatcher-Mays of the Rainier Valley Food Bank. You'll also hear from Lynetta Keller, one of the former recipients of a King County Bar Association scholarship. They will express the need for you to help today and why. Please hear their pleas and please help. Now, as I've mentioned before, in the spirit of honoring Dr. King, we have three dynamite and incredible speakers who will present during the months of October and November on topics of voting rights, housing, and education. Our goal here is to help feed your soul with education and knowledge, and I'm confident you will be so glad that you tuned in today. We welcome you to our first presentation, our first luncheon speaker, and that's a dear friend and a person who I believe is one of the best lawyers in America, Jeffery Robinson. He will present on the topic of voting rights. Please see the special events section of the King County Bar Association website, and there you will see his resume as well as the resume of our other presenters. Jeff is currently the Deputy Legal Director at the ACLU's office and the Director of the ACLU's Trone Center for Justice and Equality. Earlier this year, Jeff had a chance to present at the Ninth Circuit Judicial Conference. That's a conference of circuit judges and district court judges. That's a very, very tough group to impress. Jeff gave two presentations, and at the conclusion of each presentation, he received standing ovations. That's not a frequent occurrence in front of that many judges, but trust me, Jeff deserved every bit of that. As chair of our committee, I firmly believe that Dr. King would be proud of the efforts of the King County Bar Association, its board of trustees, and our committee for engaging in the work for which Dr. King gave his life. We will first hear from the representatives from the food bank, minority law student, and then we'll begin our program with Mr. Robinson. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gloria Hatcher-Mays. I'm the Executive Director for the Rainier Valley Food Bank. Thank you so much for letting me have some time with you today. We started out in 1991 as an all-volunteer organization providing food to our community, but we've grown significantly since then. 25% of all visits to food banks in the city of Seattle are made at the Rainier Valley Food Bank. We have 4 different channels that we provide food services through. And the primary one used to be, before COVID, our weekly distribution. Folks would come and shop for their groceries, but we no longer are able to do that. We've shifted to 100% home delivery service for our program now, so that folks do not have to leave their homes. They don't have to access public transportation. And we do that because we view this as an issue of social justice. We want folks to feel as though they can stay home and stay safe and still have access to a nutritious meal for their families. We are in the midst of a growth spurt. Because of our change with COVID, we have already had to start to expand our programs. We're planning to build a new facility that will take us from 2,500 square feet to over 11,000 square feet, but we really couldn't wait to do that. In order to be able to prepare the grocery bags that we deliver to home, we needed to have space that was safe for our volunteers and our staff to operate in, that would permit them to have social distancing. So we have already launched 2 new expansions to our program. We've expanded our help services so that we have clothing that we give away for free. And we also are offering transportation vouchers for those people who are trying to seek employment or go to jobs in a safe way so that they don't have to access public transportation. We plan to have our project shovel ready by the spring of 2021, and we'll move from having 2,500 square feet to over 11,000 square feet at a price tag of $7.6 million. And this is our new space. As you can see, it will give us a much greater capacity to be able to do grocery distribution. It gives the staff a much larger space in which they can work in and meet with the community. And we'll also have a commercial kitchen where we can do classes to teach community members how to not only prepare meals, but also how to preserve foods for longevity. We'll have a community garden, we'll have a community kitchen, and as I mentioned, we'll expand our helpline services to offer rental assistance and utility assistance for those most in need. We have 4 main goals for our new space. We would want it to be a safer physical space. We want to improve food and storage capacity, and we want to promote healthy food habits. The last but not least is to make sure that we're expanding an innovative social support program so that folks have access to funds and services that help the community build resiliency. And that's what we're all about at Rainier Valley Food Bank. We are all about building community, building resiliency, and being a supportive hub to help people access the food and the services that they need. So again, I want to thank you so much for allowing me to have some time with you today. And I look forward to having you contact me should you have any questions about our program, or if you'd like to volunteer to support us, or if you'd like to offer to support our campaign to build a new space. Thank you so very much.
My name is Lynetta Keller, and I am an attorney at Lane Powell. I graduated from the University of Washington School of Law. I want to thank the King County Bar Association's Martin Luther King Committee for providing this scholarship to minority students and giving me an opportunity to share my story. I am a past recipient of the Minority Scholarship Fund. In the 3rd grade, my dream was to be an attorney. When I was a senior in high school, I got pregnant with my son. People who I thought would support me through anything told me that my life was over. However, I could not let others dictate my life. So in 2006, I was 6 months pregnant and graduated from high school. At that point, I knew that I could achieve anything. I remember a week after giving birth, I was at Bellevue College taking my entrance exam. I graduated from Bellevue with honors and transferred to the University of Washington and received my bachelor's. Sometimes it seems all the statistics are against me succeeding in life, but I'm not a statistic. Instead, I'm a role model. My son is now 14 years old, and I'm living proof that perseverance is the key to success. In 2016, the Minority Scholarship Fund helped me achieve my dream to receive my law degree. The scholarship paves the way for people like me to achieve their goals and dreams.
Hello, my name is Jeff Robinson, and it is a pleasure and an honor to address you today. I want to spend a few minutes talking about our history, our shared history in America, and how that relates to the topic of racism and voting. As we come up to the 2020 elections, the issue of voting in America is obviously critical, and the history behind it is incredibly compelling. So is this what democracy looks like? 1 in 13 voting age Black Americans can't vote because of being formally incarcerated. That is more than 4 times greater than all other American groups. In Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia, 1 out of 5 Black citizens can't vote because they are formally incarcerated. In the state of Florida, more than 1 million people were impacted by the Amendment 4 litigation that gave the right to vote to people who were formally incarcerated. And when we think about red states in America, one thing I'd ask you to think about is whether those states are red because of who can and can't vote. The history behind the racial and racist motivations in the way we vote in this country is shocking, but it's our shared history. And the fact that we have ignored it in part is why we are where we are today on so many issues. So if I talk about this term, white supremacy and the Constitution, it is a difficult term. I understand that. It is a term that is simply defined as the theory, belief, or philosophy that white people are superior to Black people in every single way, Black people and other people of color, in every single way. That's just a simple way to say it. And it is an offensive theory, and it shocks people when they hear that and hear it applied to ourselves, our culture, our Constitution. I'm not going to go through all of the elements in the Constitution that might suggest to you that the theory of white supremacy was a pillar of founding this country. But I am going to go through.
Congress not.
And excuse me, I'll just start before I go here. On Juneteenth, 2018, in front of a packed audience in Town Hall Theater in New York City, the Who We Are Project put on a presentation, Who We Are, A Chronicle of Racism in America. This is a presentation that deals with American history from 1619 to 2020. And it deals with the question, why does America look like it does? Why are there so many African-American people in prison? Is it that, quote unquote, those people are just more criminal, just more willing to break the law? Or is there something else going on? Why is the wealth gap such that the average white family has a net worth equal to the average net worth of 12 Black families combined? Is that just because Blacks don't work it hard, aren't as industrious, or is there something else going on? This presentation was filmed, and one of the things that we did in this presentation was to have actors read letters and other historical documents. And if we go back to the Constitution, Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet. So people had to write letters to say what they were concerned about. And what you're about to hear are excerpts from 2 letters written by Patrick Henry. Yes, give me liberty or give me death. And what he was writing about essentially was, what are we going to do about these Black enslaved people?
May Congress not say that every black man must fight. Did we not see a little of this the last war? We were not so hard pushed as to make emancipation general, but acts of assembly passed that every slave who will go to the army should be free. In this situation, I see a great deal of the property of the people of Virginia in jeopardy, and their peace and tranquility gone.
Patrick Henry is saying, what are we doing with these enslaved people? Because if they start to become quote unquote free, quote unquote citizens even, what kind of rights are they going to have? And it went further than that. Because remember, one of the things the Constitution established was the Electoral College. And the ability to suppress insurrections by enslaved people was something that Patrick Henry was concerned about. Listen to this.
In this state, there are 236,000 blacks. And there are many more in several other states, but there are few or none in the northern states. If there should happen to be an insurrection of slaves, the country cannot said to be invaded. They cannot, therefore, suppress it without the interposition of Congress. Congress, and Congress only under this new Constitution, can call forth the militia.
Now, we're here to talk about voting today. So I'm not going to suggest to you that the Second Amendment to the Constitution was inserted only to allow the South to arm its slave patrols. But I will tell you that what Patrick Henry said there and what others were saying was very clear. If these enslaved people decide they want to be free, we need weapons to keep them in their place. But how does this relate to voting? 236,000 blacks in Virginia and few or none in the northern states. Article 1, Section 2, the 3/5 clause. Many people say, and I have even characterized it this way before, that this was saying that black people were worth 3/5 of a human being, and that's really not true. Because black people weren't really considered human beings. We were subhuman in the eyes of the early Americans. This was simply a measure of how our bodies were to be counted for purposes of votes in the Electoral College. Article 2, Section 1, each state shall appoint a number of electors equal to the number of senators and representatives. The Electoral College was created specifically to ensure the South that they would have a major say in who was president of the United States. And I believe the first 4 presidents of the United States came from Virginia. And remember what Patrick Henry said, 236,000 blacks in Virginia, multiply that by 3/5 and you still get a big number, especially given the number of people in colonial America at the time. In Article 4, Section 2, no freedom. A runaway enslaved person had to be returned to their owners upon demand. We're not here to talk about policing. We're here to talk about voting, but you're going to see an intersection in a minute. Just understand that when you ask the question, why is there such mistrust between law enforcement and black communities around America? In the document that founded our country, law enforcement was given the responsibility to stop, suppress, and end attempts by black people to be free. The word slavery appears once in our Constitution. It doesn't appear in the clauses of the Constitution that talk about extending the trans-African slave trade until 1808, because the word slavery is kind of a negative term. The South didn't feel comfortable with it. The North wanted the South to feel comfortable. The word slavery appears in the 13th Amendment, which did not abolish slavery. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime. And you will see how the law enforcement connection and the 13th Amendment have combined to impact voting in America. What happened after the Civil War? Few people understand that before the 15th Amendment was ever passed, there were 700,000 registered Black voters in the South. 2,000 Black men had been elected to serve in office. Black Americans knew exactly how to exercise the vote. They knew the power that they had if they would go to the polls, and they were exercising it. The 15th Amendment did not give Black men the right to vote. Once again, even I have characterized it that way, but it did not do that. What the 15th Amendment says is the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So what they were saying essentially was, you got to come up with a reason that sounds like something other than race. And if you do that, then you can maintain your ability to suppress the Black vote. And the Southern states were listening, and they jumped quickly. What happened after the war? Well, Samuel Tilden and Rutherford Hayes opposed each other for president in 1876, and it was a really close race. And there was a dispute in three states about what slate of electors was going to go to the Electoral College. And the entire election was up for grabs. And once again, the Electoral College came to the rescue, like deja vu all over again, because it came to the rescue of the concept of white supremacy. That was the concept upon which it was inserted into the Constitution, that with the 3/5 clause. And please, I hope you will accept that those two things combined certainly are elements of white supremacy. There is no other way to characterize that. But so now we have a decision. Which slate of electors is going to get accepted? And the North and the South made a deal for a cabinet post for a Southerner, for a public works bill to rebuild the South, and for the end of Reconstruction, withdrawing the Northern troops from the South. And for those guarantees, the electors that supported Rutherford Hayes for president were seated. Rutherford Hayes became the president. The troops from the North withdrew from the South. And what began after that were laws, and this is the best way to describe them, essentially intended to criminalize Black life. 90% of the people forced into convict leasing arrangements after the Civil War were Black. And convict leasing was the extension of enslaving people, because people figured out we can keep the economy we have if we convict people of crimes, imprison them, and then rent them out as labor. Non-white prisoners in Alabama jumped from 2% in 1850 to 74% in 1870. And then the states started responding with expanding disenfranchisement laws. And remember, right after the Civil War, stealing a chicken could get you 10 years in prison. Those were the kind of laws that were passed, and they were passed so that people could be imprisoned, so they could be convicted of crimes and treated as enslaved people. And one of the collateral consequences that we're now so familiar with that began to be added onto this were these disenfranchisement laws. And don't have any question about what the motive of these laws were. Because between 1865 and 1880, 13 states out of 38 total, that's 1/3 of the country, enacted broad felony disenfranchisement laws. And the states with the larger Black prison populations were more likely to adopt or extend their felony disenfranchisement laws, and the states with the smallest portion of Black people in prison were more likely to abolish restrictions on ex-felons or ex-incarcerated people voting. And remember, the 15th Amendment said you can't use race. So there were poll taxes. There were grandfather clauses, usually dating to 1867, meaning the grandfather clause was if your grandfather, in order for you to be able to vote, your grandfather had to vote. And of course, for many Black Americans going back to their grandparents, you're talking about people that were enslaved. But in addition to these, there were literacy tests. This is the State of Louisiana Literacy Test from 1964 to be given to anyone who cannot prove a 5th grade education. You see that second line, do what you are told to do in each statement, nothing more, nothing less. Be careful, as one wrong answer denotes failure of the test. You have 10 minutes, get ready, go. And as you look at these questions, ask yourself, what do these things have to do with whether you are competent or not to vote? And as you're looking at some of these questions, number one, draw a line around the number or letter of this sentence. Is that the right answer or not? And is a line around, do you have to draw it all the way around, or is as it's drawn okay? Look down further on this page at some of the other answers, some of the other questions, and ask yourself, what could this possibly have to do with whether you're competent to vote, or does this look more like something to try and trip you up? It went on. Look at number 15. Is that a dot above the O, or is it a small o? Is it a failure if you didn't fill in the dot? And look at number 21. Print the word vote upside down, but in the correct order. What in the world is going on here? And of course, it's clear. The 15th Amendment said you can't use race. It didn't say you can't use a screwed up test that virtually no one will pass to keep people from voting. So here I ask you to take a deep breath, because the images you are about to see are stunning and they are incredibly difficult, but they are part of what I am referring to as a naked lunch moment with our history in America. Naked Lunch, the title of the book by William Burroughs, and when he explained the meaning of that title, it's that moment when everyone has to look at what is really on the end of their fork. And when you're talking about voter suppression of Black votes in America, you are talking about the history we've been through, those poll taxes, that grandfather clause, those literacy tests, and then you're talking about out and out horrific terroristic violence, because that was an effective way to keep people from voting. And the people in this picture are not at a picnic. They're at a lynching. And as we went from the 18th century to the 19th century to the 20th century, this is what race in America was about. And this is how you keep a population away from the polls. And again, please take a deep breath, because this is going to be hard for just a few seconds. Race riots in New Orleans and New York City in 1900. This is the number of Black people that were lynched in each year in the first decade of the 20th century. And you see the people in the pictures, Nobody was worried about being identified as having participated in these lynchings. You can't do these lynchings without the police being either directly involved or passively approving of them. And between 1865 and 1950, there were more than 6,000 documented racial terror lynchings in America. That means for that 85-year period, America was lynching Black people in this country at the rate of more than one every week for 85 years. And people understood the connection this had to voting. This is Theodore G. Bilbo, United States Senator from the state of Mississippi from 1935 to 1947. You are about to see a quote of his. I will let you read it for yourself. It has a word that is disgusting, but once again, this is our shared history. And if you want to understand the connection between racism and voting and how that impacts America, then don't turn away and look. You can read this for yourself. He's not finished. This is our shared history, and this is what people need to understand when we come to understand why the restrictions on voting in Black communities across America have evolved to where they are today. The Voting Rights Act in 1965 was an historic event, no question about it. And unfortunately, it was followed very quickly by the war on drugs. And remember, we are now talking felony disenfranchisement, the taking of the right to vote away from millions of people. This is what the prison population in the United States looked like as Richard Nixon took office. Over 200,000 people. And if it was that way today, we have 2.3 million people approximately in prison today. So 200,000 people would say there's no way. Well, that's what we had as Nixon took office. And their intent to criminalize and continue to disenfranchise Black voters was clear. Not in my words, in John Ehrlichman's own words. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities, arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. This wasn't by mistake. And when those convictions came out of the war on drugs, person after person after person is disenfranchised. And this isn't just Republicans. This is the war on crime by Bill Clinton and the 1994 crime bill, where he's talking about cutting the federal workforce by 270,000 positions, realizing that the federal government is one of the largest employers of Black and brown people in America. So he was going to cut those jobs and then take that money, and who was it he was going to be putting in jail? This was the narrative that the Democrats were running.
They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heal.
First, we have to bring them to heal. As soon as you start talking about human beings in terms that are subhuman, you are signaling what we are about to do to them is going to be ugly, and we need to justify it. The least of the damage, and that is not underestimating the significance of the damage of disenfranchisement, but that is some of the least of the damage that was done by the 1994 crime bill. because that's where things ended up as of 2012, and we know now that we've gone beyond that. Half a century after Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act to protect the rights of all Americans to vote, the Supreme Court decision in Shelby County versus Holder ended a provision of the Voting Rights Act that determined which jurisdictions with a history of discrimination had to pre-clear changes in their election rules with the federal government prior to implementing them. These were the states that were using those poll taxes and those literacy tests and those grandfather clauses and the other code word positions or restrictions that were meant to keep Black people from voting. The court said, we don't need those anymore. I guess we're in a post-racial America. By 2016, 3 years after that decision, 14 states had passed restrictive voting laws, including Alabama, Arizona, Indiana, Kansas, Mississippi, Nebraska, New Hampshire, Ohio, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, Wisconsin. We didn't need that provision anymore. These states seem to take notice of that provision being gone very quickly. So I want to talk for a few minutes about voting, and specifically the 2020 election, which is about 45 days away. We have looked back in history and we understand that there are patterns about our work at the ACLU. And in presidential election years, the ACLU is usually doing between 3 and 6 election-related pieces of litigation in a presidential election year. In 2020, we have filed 24 cases in 19 states. In Alabama, Connecticut, Kansas, and Missouri, we have worked to eliminate the excuse requirement for voting by mail. In other words, you don't have to have an excuse of, I'm busy, I'm out of the country, or I'm in the hospital. You can simply vote by mail. And this, I think, is one of the things I'm happiest about that the ACLU is doing, just in terms of informing people about what they can do to vote in this election. This website, or this link, will take you to the website that the ACLU has established. And I'm actually gonna hope that it works and walk through it with you for just a second. I'm leaving it up here long enough so that folks will be able to capture it. So clicking on that link will take you to this page. And you see here in the first sentence, with 50 days until Election Day, the American Civil Liberties Union today launched Let People Vote. I'm going to click on this, see if we can all see it. There is a nationwide tag, which will give you information, but then there is a tag for every state. So for example, if you go to the state of Washington and click on Washington, what you'll see is 46 days left to return your ballot to vote by mail in Washington, and information, remember to check, make sure you're registered to vote. And here then is just information about what you can do in terms of voting in Washington. And then there is a page like this for every state that's involved. And so, I guess I would end by saying this. If the importance of the vote of Black Americans and other Americans of color wasn't so important, why have there been so many efforts to restrict it, to prevent it from happening, and to minimize it? If we ask ourselves those questions, then I think the importance of the vote becomes very, very clear. I hope this history helps frame our ideas about the kinds of things we need to do and the kinds of things we need to be aware of as we go forward. Thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Jeff did an amazing job. A round of applause to Jeff. You can go ahead and clap and take off your microphones or your mute buttons, whatever you have in front of you. But we want to express a deep amount of appreciation to Jeff for what he gave to you today and hopefully fed your soul. Our next program is set for November 12th, same time with Trish Milinas Zico on giving our children the education they deserve. Another dynamic presentation I know you will not want to miss. Hopefully you will leave today convinced that the King County Bar Association's Luncheon Committee honored its promise to feed your soul, and hopefully you can help feed and educate others. Thank you, have a good day, and please stay safe. My name is Richard Jones, and I approve of this message.